happy to have Avery back with us. She will be teaching this summer. She's teaching right now. She's doing all of these really wonderful things. So please listen up.
Hello. This is like my ultimate nightmare scenario, like talking about myself in front of like largely a room of people that I know. So sorry in advance if I seem incredibly nervous. It's because I am. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah. My name is Avery. I'm from Portland. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I just graduated from OSU this last year with my BFA in studio art with a focus in painting and sculpture. I make a lot of work about living with chronic pain and navigating a social landscape that wasn't designed to include me as a disabled person. A lot of my work centers around feeling like I have very little control over my body and my life circumstances and how everything's really up to chance. I've used my practice to work through a lot of grief that comes with chronic illness, and over the years used materiality and process to communicate the everyday pain and labor and fear that I feel. I'm trying not to read off of these notes that I have here, because I think that sounds very rehearsed. But again, I'm kind of a yapper, so I might be between. We'll see what happens. Okay. So during my undergrad at OSU, I was really resistant to being considered an activist with my art. I didn't want it to be my responsibility to educate people about chronic pain. I didn't want it to be my responsibility to fight against the systemic exclusion of disabled people from the world around us. But through my residency with the Arts Center and kind of the exploration of my practice post-grad in general, it's become increasingly apparent to me that by just continuing to exist in this body and take up space in the art world, living in an unreliable body, I am in many ways kind of inherently committing an act of protest. So just making work about my lived experiences and creating spaces for conversation like this is in itself kind of unavoidably activism. As I began work in this residency with the Arts Center, it became more and more clear to me how important the process, the actual act of making work was important to the process of the work that I was making, and contributed a lot to the overall meaning of those pieces. So if the process is so important, it doesn't really make sense for me to keep making myself struggle and in many ways inflicting additional pain through the process through which I make work that's already about pain. So this has kind of been the major turning point of my work between undergrad and the stuff that I'm doing now, because I'm still working with a lot of the same subjects, but my approach and my perspective has changed really drastically. So then making pieces that kind of explore joy and beauty as much as they're kind of imbued with pain acts as more of a reflection of my real day-to-day life. Does anybody have any questions just about the show in general? Yeah, what you got, Willow?
Can you tell us a little bit more about the domino sculptures that you have?
Yeah, for sure. So I was just with this show working with kind of this idea of chance and kind of this fork in the road, I suppose, in life where chance can either go towards fate being a negative connotation of death or negative experiences versus serendipity, which is wonderful joys that kind of come by chance to us. And so I was using this model of a six-sided die to kind of represent that idea of chance. And then I rolled a dice 1,200 times, which was maybe too many, but that's okay. And then I graphed a distribution of how often the numbers came up and kind of turned that into a visual representation, and then kind of did that again for each of the 36 die faces to determine then which texture got applied to them. And I thought that was really interesting because they still look pretty random. They don't look like they were, I don't know, like I was a little worried about like a bunch of numbers being next to each other, like having the same texture like all in a row, but then it still like looks very like random and even, and I thought that was a very like interesting model for how like life kind of is. Like there's ups and downs, but like ultimately it just goes. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, so that's kind of the meaning with that piece. Yeah.
You mentioned in your artist statement, like a few of these like core values, like love, joy, peace, patience. Like what were your like how did you choose your specific like words and like ideas?
Yeah, I like grew up in the church, and there's a piece that's in there that's kind of about like a lot of women in my life that I think kind of shaped who I am, and a lot of those people were like figures from my church, and so most of those words are like fruits of the Spirit from the Bible, but I think that a lot of times people like think of them as kind of being like oppressive in some ways, but I feel that like these women kind of showed me how to like fight for things that are really important to me by like learning those like spiritual gifts, I suppose. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about your smaller sculpture?
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I got to play a little bit with ceramics this residency. I'm still getting out of the like academic environment, but yeah, I got to mess around with some ceramics, and I was like really interested in, well, my minor was in art history, and so I have like kind of a special interest like iconography and using like practices from different art movements. So I was thinking about some of these paintings from like the futurist painters and how they were trying to look at like a stationary object but represent it from like multiple angles or multiple perspectives, or like a moving object like at the same time on a flat canvas. And then I was just thinking about like how that can be kind of applied to sculpture, and so I ended up with this lady with many legs. And I don't know, I think like I have been in like a weird like transitionary time in my life right now, and kind of like friendships and relationships like going in and out of my life, and I don't know, I think that idea just kind of like resonated with the like futurist movement. So yeah, that's about that one.
So I have a question about that sculpture. I've come and looked at it a number of times. I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
It appears that she's enjoying herself.
Yeah, I would say.
So the significance of the one that's coming straight up and out, is that things that are going away or things that she doesn't want to enjoy?
Sure, I think that's like a good reading. I have ADHD, and I like cannot possibly for my life sit still or stand still, as you've probably noticed, as I'm pacing a little bit here. So I think like for my like perspective in making that piece, like kind of this idea of her like moving around a lot was more so what I was thinking about. I don't know that it had like super significant meaning with like the positions of her legs, although it does like feel important to me that she does come off as like joyous. Yeah, so I'm glad you got there. Hey.
Questions. How do you choose a medium since you're interdisciplinary? Whether to gravitate much towards ceramics or fiber or paintings? I've seen a lot of your paintings. I think they're lovely, and then I see all these other things that you do, and I'm curious how you decide.
Yeah, I have like a problem with collecting art supplies, and have a tendency to kind of just try everything. which works great because I would love to be an educator full time, and having a lot of experience with a lot of materials is helpful. But I think generally I would like consider myself more of a painter. I really like fell in love with oil painting in my undergrad, which I was not expecting to happen, and it did. But none of the work in there is oil, it's mostly acrylic. And then I've always loved like textile crafts. I think there's like a really rich history of that being like considered like women's work, and using that kind of association and applying it to like works like the one that's in there that's like very directly representing women in my life, like lends a lot of really cool meaning. So in that way the material's kind of doing the work for me. But yes. What you got, Willow?
I wanted an opportunity to ask about your larger painting that's in the center of your show, what she's laying on, and what does the blue symbolize to you?
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so again, I have like this background in art history, and I went on a study abroad trip to Italy, and we were looking at a lot of like Renaissance paintings, and I had just like the time of my life like studying those. And there's this one called Penitent Magdalene by Tintoretto, and it's kind of like the composition is like really modeled off of that, and just like the story of Mary Magdalene like biblically like resonates with me a lot, and this idea of like feeling like I need to be like rescued, and I can't really do that for myself. Anyway, and in the painting, she's like kind of sitting in this like pile of hay and like this woven basket, but it just didn't make sense for generally what I work with. I do a lot of like big pink voids. If you've seen any of my other work, you probably know. I usually refer to it as like the pink abyss. So that's in there, but it's just kind of this like it creates this like separation between like whether this figure is like existing on the same plane as the stuff that's around her, because I think I have like a pretty like legendary like imaginative life that I think like comes through a lot in those paintings, and you know, asking questions about whether like she's experiencing the blue goo or not, or if that's all like imagined, is very interesting to me. So that's kind of the pink abyss in the surrounding area. I use that like iridescent medium in a few paintings that I have to kind of represent this idea of like losing yourself, or like feeling kind of like suffocated, or like you're drowning, oftentimes like in another person, or in certain circumstances. And yeah, just this kind of like magical sparkly goo is like fun and exciting to me, and I think, you know, is nice to look at, but ultimately the paintings are usually like about some like hard stuff, so I think trying to like find a little bit of joy in that process is good. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
What about the skull on that? What is
The
that?
school, yeah, and that's like kind of where this idea of like fate comes in, which, you know, within like the biblical context, like I think in the story and at which like that painting, Tintoretto's painting, is like taking place, like Christ had just died on the cross, and then Mary Magdalene's like left to kind of like be on this earth and have like faith by herself, and that's like really overwhelming. And so the skull's actually in the original painting, and it's sort of just like this idea of like fate and death, and like ultimately that's kind of like where we're all going. But yeah, that also has like some significance with, there's like this other part of that painting that I did not talk about, that I'd just seen Swan Lake, at OSU, they had like sorry you were there, the like, was it a German
No,
company?
it was the Ukrainian one.
Okay, yeah, it was like a
From
Ukrainian
the sister town
ballet.
of Corvallis or whatever.
Yeah. They just had come and put on Swan Lake at OSU, and we went to go see that, and I was just really interested because a lot of like ballet companies will change the ending of that story because it's like pretty dark, where a lot of the times like the ballets will have them like fight and win, and they'll like I don't know, like the curse that's on Odette, if you're familiar with the story. She's like a swan during the day, and she becomes like a beautiful woman at night, and she like falls in love with this prince, and anyway, so a lot of the ballet companies will like change the ending so that ultimately like they get to be together, but in like the original version of it, the curse isn't broken, and like Odette and the prince like drown themselves in the lake, and it's like very sad, but also I think in like a lot of ways like really beautiful, and just, you know, kind of this idea of chance and like fate, and there being like consequences to sometimes like not having control of your own destiny, I suppose. So I think that the like school relates a lot to that idea too, and that's where the swan feathers in there come from as well. Yeah.
Okay, I have like a pointed question a little bit. So like, I'm very lucky enough to have like watched you do a lot of like your process in like making your art, specifically this painting. You should share more about like your process of like making this painting and different things you did, because I think it's very interesting. I think people would like to hear.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I had started that one like during my undergrad, and I think that my like feelings towards it changed a lot. That I kind of talked about like in my talk a little bit, just around like it doesn't really make sense for me to like spend all this time like using a painting to like process grief, and to like put me in a place where I'm like going to my studio class and I'm like, oh, why am I crying in the corner? Like, this doesn't feel good. This isn't fun. This isn't like how I want to be spending my energy, I suppose. So I think that kind of started that way, and then I wasn't happy with where it was going, and I sort of just left it alone for a while, and then came back to it during this residency, and found like a lot of ways that the things I've been like thinking about now kind of like tie into what I was doing with it then, and that was like oddly like serendipitous, if you will. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
So what's next for you?
Oh my gosh, what a wonderful question, Erin. I'm working on applying for a master's program. I'd really like to teach full-time. That's kind of like the dream. So I'm gonna go get my MFA, and then hopefully continue to do things like this between now and then. Yeah.
So along those lines, I know you do some teaching and just are here in town teaching high schoolers right now. Tell us a little bit more about what your vision is when you're teaching, how do you teach, and then also what does that bring and what does it stir up inside of you when you're teaching?
Sure, yeah, ooh, good question. Sorry, let me formulate my thoughts briefly. I think I'm like very interested in like idea making and kind of like encouraging thought processes more so than just like teaching technical skills. That was like, I think something that I wish I had learned a little bit earlier on, is how to you know, like be thinking for myself and incorporating like things that are really important to me into my work. As much as I love drawing still lifes, they're not always the most exciting thing I could do. And I think that like high schoolers and middle schoolers and, you know, all through college to like feel that as well. So I think just trying to get, you know, kids excited about trying something new, and art can be like low stakes, and it doesn't have to be like a beautiful finished project. It can just, you know, be a process. It can be like finding joy and creativity and like the actual learning of stuff. And yeah, hope that answers your question. Cool.
Any other questions?
Talk about the boobies.
The boobies.
Why fabric over plaster or paint or whatever?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think that like doing like beaded work and quilting and using textile craft to sort of communicate like a lot of the like labor that goes into like mothering, and I feel like I had like a collection of mothers. This is my mom right here. She is delightful. But I was very lucky to like have a group of women, including some of her friends, that just like poured into my life and really, I think, shaped me into somebody that I'm like really proud to be. And anyway, I really want to honor that, and I think that like historically, a lot of these like techniques have been done by women and also have been used to kind of keep women out of the art world, in looking at like the difference between what is like craft and what is considered like high art. And I think that like approaching melding those together is one of my personal interests. But yes, so that's why we do fabric for the movies. Also, I'm gonna just like, I really enjoyed making this work, and I'm excited to get to share it with you all now. If you haven't gotten a chance to listen, there's an interview I did with the curator here on the Art Center website, and there's some headphones in the gallery if you want to listen to it there too. I'm out of breath. But yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you to the Art Center and just for like giving me this opportunity and this residency, and getting to learn from all of the kind staff here has been like the highlight of my life. So thanks for being around. And I'd also just like to thank all of you lovely people, because it just like really shocks me every time that like so many people are willing to like spend their time and energy, or even like financial resources, like supporting myself and supporting the arts. And yeah, just like as an artist, like we really can't do the things that we do without people coming to look at it. So yes, just thank you from the bottom of my heart, and go eat cheese and crackers.